Hi guys, welcome to another book review. So today I'm going to be sharing with you another book that was a random find. And I'm sure that once I tell you guys a little bit about this book, some of you are going to be like, could you be any nerdier? And the answer is yes. Yes, I could. I could be a lot nerdier. Okay. Um, so this was written by Matthew Desmond and it's called Evicted: Poverty and Profit in an American City. So this gentleman, I believe he's got a degree in sociology. He actually lived with the tenants in these in their apartments or houses, whatever dwelling they were renting, and he also followed the landlords too. And he even followed one of the properties while it was transitioning from a landlord to a property management company. And you got to see the reaction of the tenants already there. So it's pretty interesting. He did a lot of research. He also went to the eviction courts to see how that process worked, and gathered data regarding those statistics and things that usually increase chances of being evicted. Oddly enough, children is one of them. If you have children, you're 4 times as likely to be evicted. At least in Milwaukee. Fun fact. And I have to say, one of the reasons why I was interested in buying this book is because he wrote this during the housing market bubble and crisis between like 2008 to 2011. So in there, that's when he was doing a lot of this research and following these folks. And now with COVID, you have the eviction moratoriums coming up. They're probably going to get lifted in some cases. And what we had chose to do as a country is basically have the eviction moratorium, but tenants were still accruing the debt. So you still owe that back rent. That doesn't go away. It's just tacking on. And yes, there are government programs that can provide assistance. There are local programs, but just to kind of burst that bubble, I live in Las Vegas, and while there are those government programs, I can safely say that there is a backlog and people are still waiting for their application to be processed. Most landlords are still waiting for that money or learning that they may not get that money, just that kind of stuff. So they're out there, but that doesn't mean that it got resolved. It's still in the works of being resolved. And at the same time, it's not a guarantee that it would hold off the eviction. And there was even a gentleman in Las Vegas who recently said that he just left his apartment and decided to live in his van because he didn't want an eviction on his record. And he also didn't want to continue to accrue the back debt. He just, because he's like, well, I still can't pay my rent next month, so what's the point in owing, another $1,300 when my lease is up and I could just move out, and then yes, I still owe the back rent, but I don't owe anymore. So, food for thought there. But back to this book. So it's interesting because I can see, or could see when I was reading it, a lot of parallels in regards to what we're going to face coming up as those eviction moratoriums get lifted. But also I have to say, he's following people at or below the poverty line. Okay, so these are not people who are in the middle class and upwards. Like, these are people that are legitimately struggling to make it. They have a lot of situations that are very difficult to overcome. They don't really have family members that can help financially or provide them a place to live because their relatives are kind of in the same boat that they are. Um, so it talks about that. And it also talks about the landlords, right? And managing these properties. Like, it talks about relationships between tenant and landlord too. So there's some landlords where the property is a little bit dilapidated, but at the same time, the tenant, they can't call the building inspector, because if they do that and their unit's not up to code, more than likely none of the other units are up to code. So that means they would evict all of their neighbors. So it's it presents some catch-22 situations. And at the end of the day, the landlords are like, that's the condition it's in. They'll either take it or leave it. It's all about, this is what's available. This is what we have. Because the alternative is these people being homeless. And of course, that's worse than not having a roof over your head for most people. So it's just a very interesting, all of the stories that you are able to read in this book, all of the statistics that you're able to learn, even though they really mainly just pertain to Milwaukee, but it's still fascinating, because you do wonder, would it be like this all across the nation if there was this kind of database for it, if other people were tracking it? Like, he basically ended up creating a survey because he couldn't find some of the information he wanted. So, there were people for a nonprofit going door to door in these neighborhoods where he was doing this research and asking the renters questions. So, props to him, because that's a lot of work. And the nonprofit that helped him do it, but you know what I'm saying. It's also really interesting too, just to kind of see the other dynamics too of kind of what can occur in these situations. Like, it talks about some of the landlords evicting the tenants for like being a nuisance tenant. So for example, there's a call there, it's a domestic violence situation in this book, and they call the cops because this couple is fighting. And then the next thing you know, the landlord's like, hey, that's your third call in a month. Now we're on this call list. Your boyfriend's gotta go, or we're gonna evict you. Like, people really get put in these situations, and it's really interesting and shocking, because there's a lot of people where, unless you yourself are a renter, you really don't know what they're able to do, what's legal and what's not legal, right? Because you're renting a property from someone else who owns the property. So what legally can they do? Which is always why it's very important to know your rights or whatever. But again, he's following people at or below poverty line. So when they go to eviction court, can they afford a lawyer? No, they can't. And because of that, most of these people lose their cases and get evicted because their landlord has a lawyer, right? So again, I have to say, it's just a very, very in-depth and fascinating read for me. It's definitely for fellow nerds who are curious about this topic. And to be honest, there probably is going to be another housing crisis once all these eviction moratoriums and stuff get lifted. And there is also a shortage of affordable housing. I remember going to high school, and in, economics, in my AP government class, they were saying that your housing is only supposed to take 30% of your income. Good luck, you know what I mean? And that's, honestly, I would say my housing at one point, I don't know, even right now, if it was just me by myself, it would probably take at least half of my current income per month. So that 30% is definitely not realistic. And I'm sure in California, you're like 30% of my income? You know, I know so many people in California struggling to make any kind of pay or find affordable housing at all. And that's like for a shack, no plumbing. You know, we've all seen the meme, you know, $300,000 and it's like a little shed. But I would definitely encourage people to check this book out, give it a good read, and if you were fascinated by the first housing crisis, this is probably going to be filled with a lot of information that kind of fascinates you. And I have to say, I am really happy that I was able to get information like this, just so I myself am more aware. But this is probably going to be an issue eventually nationwide that's going to have to be resolved, because if you don't have affordable housing for people who are at poverty line or below, you're going to see an increase in the homeless population. It's just going to happen because there's nowhere for them to go. So it'll definitely give you just more information to think about. And he does present ways to address the issue. But the thing is, are we really ever going to focus and make it a priority consistently to resolve the issue? Because this isn't something where it would be a one bill situation, one law situation, and then boom, housing crisis solved. This is going to take continued maintenance and investment. So it's definitely going to eventually be an issue that needs to be addressed. The only thing is, how are we going to address it? When are we going to address it? And are we going to consistently work to continue to address it? Because if we don't, it's going to continue to be a problem. Or maybe not a problem, just like a concern, right? Because think about it. If the poorest of the poor can't find affordable housing, that also means that it could eventually go up the chain. Like, I live in Las Vegas and I already know people that have been priced out of the housing market, right? It's basically the same thing, except you're not renting. You're looking to buy a house, but you got priced out of the market. So that means you have to kind of stay where you're at. So it's just, this book just really provides a lot of good food for thought. And if that's the kind of thing that you're interested in, then I encourage you read it. And if it's not your thing, then, well, guess what? I'm a nerd. So anyway, till next time.